Hey, welcome, welcome. Hi. I managed to finish part of my breakfast. Yay, I call that a win. How's everyone doing? I hope you had a good welcome. A good welcome? I hope you had a good welcome, but I also hope you had a good weekend. My brain just kind of folded up like a garden hose. You know when you get those kinks in the garden hose and the water doesn't flow anymore? That was my brain just now. How's everyone doing? Hi Vessel, congrats on first. Gore, thank you so much for the lurk. Let me get this right. Yay! All right. Yeah. How is everyone doing? I am. I'm a little bit low energy. Because it became very hot. So the weather today, not today, the weather these past few days is just a roller coaster. Like beginning-ish of last week, or not even then, like the weekend before, it was cold and raining like the entire weekend through. And then last week it turned very hot, and then the weekend again it was raining the whole time, and now it's hot again. And now I'm saying, or now the weather report is saying, yo, it's gonna rain again. Are you in the US? No, I'm not. I am currently in Taiwan. I say currently, I am in Taiwan. uh, so being an island, the weather here can sometimes be a bit all over the place. And welcome. Explains why you just woke up? Yeah, kind of. I mean, it is almost noon. And I did do some stuff. I had to go grab breakfast. I had to like water the plants, etc. There were some things I had to go do. But yeah, it's been difficult getting up. And last night, I swear there must have been like 3 or 4 mosquitoes in my room that I just could not get because over the course of trying to fall asleep, I just noticed more and more and more bites all over my body, and some of them woke me up. And it sucks. So yeah, that happened. But I'm here now. I can chat for a little bit about prepping and running RPGs and such. I don't have too much time. I have to teach again. Later in the afternoon. But we'll get through what we can. We'll talk a little bit. We'll answer questions if there are any. We'll do some discussion, etc. All that good stuff. Also, music. While I'm here. But yeah, how are you doing? Lady Group. It's nice to see you here again. My brain is still... It's still like an old engine, still trying to rev up. Where are my... Oh. Let me... Is this playing? Yes, it is. Okay. Now I can hear it. I'll just leave this in the background and hop over to here. Okay. Now, Are we doing art? We're not doing art. We're doing more talking about RPGs and how to prep and run sessions. Um, there were a couple of there was some good discussion last time, so I figured there might be more interest, hopefully. Um, and also, it's always possible to talk more about it. I was yesterday years old when I learned I cannot create a map. Oh, yeah, like conceptually or wielding a program to use it, because those are both difficult. um, but that is definitely something, a possible topic as well. Like creating like a dungeon map, or just like a map in general. Um, like making it look nice, or things like that, because those are a lot of very different skills. Like making a good map, holy heck, that's a whole bunch of different skills that are coming together. Um, so it is a tough thing to learn, definitely. Mm, I picked up Dungeon Draft. It's great. It has a trace option allowing you to load a transparent map image to draw from. And I just cannot do it. Oh, so like drawing in general? Um, I mean, if it is drawing, then that is definitely something very. I'm not gonna call it easy, but it's definitely, I can do indoor maps. Okay, but yeah, just to finish the point, like drawing, there are definitely some fundamentals that it's possible to pick up very quickly. Things like drawing a circle, right? Drawing lines, right? That are kind of straight, kind of parallel. Drawing a spiral, usually it goes better than this. I'm drawing on a tablet right now, so it's a little bit, uh, right? Or filling up a space, saying like, I will draw lines that all go start and stop at roughly the same point. All right, or trying to fill a square without drawing the square. Things like that, right? There's a lot of basics, fundamental, just technical skills that is possible to train relatively quickly. Um, so yeah, but yeah, mapping in general, holy heck, definitely tough. Though, really, I find that a map, a map really serves two can serve two purposes. Depending on what kind of a game you're playing. The first purpose is obviously as an actual battle map, where you possibly have a grid on there, and then you you use that map to move tokens around, either in physical space or on a VTT or something, right? And you actually look. Oh, there is a tree over here on this map, right? So you have a road or something that passes through something. So, and then there's a tree uh that's been cut down and is now lying across the road, right? Um, and such, and it's very clearly been sawed through. So this is like, oh, this is an ambush site, and then you can have say, oh, this is cover, right? And maybe there is a steep bank over here that goes up, so the road is kind of in a valley kind of deal, right? Grass. Um, and I don't know. There's a rock over here. I've never drawn a rock like this. Right, something like that. So you can hide behind it and so on, and then you travel along with the cart. So you have the cart miniature. Right, very classic setup. Right, you have that's a bit small, but you have the cart miniature here, and then you have the horses that are now panicking. Um, and so on, and then you have your tokens spread out over here, etc., etc. Right, so this is one way of using a map. Sure, you've all seen it before. I use Foundry VTT. Oh, I've heard a lot about that. I've also heard that it has a high learning curve to get into it, but otherwise, but the features it gives is essentially worth it. And I try to have a battle map for all the combat scenes, as well as inns and taverns, any situation where the players are doing something. Right. So this is the one of the big uses for a map like this, right? Having it as a battle map, so you actually use the map as a game board to move on. Mm, the other way to use maps, which I assume is the way you use them, kind of, um, for things like inns and taverns, where you're not necessarily running big combat, is to have them as reference, right? To have them as mm, just a visual aid, so that everyone kind of knows what this area looks like. Um, Maybe even if we split up where everyone is, you can be like, oh, this one person is talking to some NPC in the corner, right? So um you have an inn of some sort, and then you have right, door over here, and then you have like various tables, have a bar, must always have a bar, and then you have behind here a kitchen or something, right? With various like cooking stoves, etc. And then you have, I don't know, right? And then you might have, oh, some of the PCs are up here in the bar talking to the bartender, and one of them is back here talking to someone at the table, etc. And then you can actually move your tokens. You're not using it as a battle map, but you can use it as a visual reference to keep in mind where everyone is and what's happening in the scene. And these tend to be two of the big uses of maps. There's a third use of maps, which is inspiration, where you don't have the map itself, where you don't use tokens on it and anything, right? Where you just use the map itself as kind of an inspirational image, right? It's like, especially for big impressive environments, or for magical or strange places, that it's not as not common, not as easy to visualize, right? So let me just write this down real quick. Uh, Using maps, right? So we had as a battle, right, with a grid with tactical movement and everything, as a visual aid, and as inspiration, right? So it's like you enter. Let me turn down the music slightly. Okay. You enter this, I don't know, this underground tomb, and it's actually a huge vaulted room, and there's a big statue with glowing eyes in the back end of the room, and a large sarcophagus in front of it, and there's like mist, etc. Exploration is another good one. Yeah, if you want to do location based exploration, yes, that's a very good point. Thank you. Let me put blocking in here. That's from acting, essentially saying where everyone is. Hi, Capsize. Welcome, welcome. How are you doing? I hope you had a good weekend. Um, right. So, where were we? Yeah. So inspiration. Essentially, you use that, but you don't have to use a map for it. It's just that a lot of maps also look really, really impressive. So that might be the most fitting image you find. Right? Being like, oh, this magical ancient tomb and such that it's a little bit difficult to describe, especially if you're not used to describing scenes like this. You might just throw up a picture and say, "This is essentially what it looks like," and then players can go, "Wow, that looks so cool!" Right? That kind of idea. And then yes, exploration as well um for location based exploration where like discovering rooms and such is important. Um, Although at that point, this is starting to bleed into. Um, Let me switch these two around. Can I? Maybe? Okay. So this is. Oh, come on. This is starting to bleed into where maps are not necessarily the only thing to use. Hold on. Okay. There. Okay. So what do I mean by that? Um, so for a battle mat, uh, you could also flip around visual aid and exploration, right? Kinda ish. I will leave it like this for now. So, a battle mat is essentially if you don't have a map of some sort, even if it's a very simple sketch map like I just did, um, then you're not using like the only other option is either very careful description or theater of the mind or things like that. So it's hard to replace a map with battle mat. And then the more further down you go this list, the less it needs to be a map. Exploration can be a bit exploitable. Remember being a kid playing with our brothers using the old D&D module maps. You would hide the parts we couldn't see, but this meant that we knew where to go to explore under the paper that's hiding the rest of the map. Yes, I've learned sadly that the younger players really struggle with theater of the mind, especially if they don't take notes, which they never do. Um, yeah, definitely. And that might just be like um younger, like how young? Because I can imagine that in a certain degree at a certain age, the way our brain works is still different, right? So having maps and such is useful. Definitely having visual aids and such. Like for theater of mind, you can also throw up like an image. Um and it also depends on the system itself that you're running. Right, some systems are very careful with like measuring distances and having clean positioning to establish things like flanking or whatever cover, etc. So if you're playing something like D&D, especially 4th edition, or if you're playing something like Savage Worlds and so on, you really want a battle map because a lot of the rules reference distances and ranges and cover and things like that that you can only find on a map, or that you can only clearly establish on a map. Whereas something like masks, right? A lot of PBTA games powered by the Apocalypse games and such are very much just you're telling a story together, you're having a conversation together, and then a battle mat is going to be antithetical because the game has zero rules concerning any of that. Right? In fact, it has rules for things like you can appear on a scene just like that because that's your special ability. That's what makes your character special. Um, how do you do that? Nah. But trying to concretize it, is that a word? To make it concrete on a map is going to do more harm than good. So it very much depends on the system as well. And you can just throw up mood images, or like if you want to show them, oh, this is what the tomb looks like, right? With its green glow and its fog and blah and the huge statue and etc etc, all the mood lighting. You don't have to use a map. You can also just use a painting, a drawing, something, right, of this kind of tomb, right? That is drawn from any kind of perspective. Maybe someone standing at the entrance looking into it, or just like a concept art. Concept art is amazing for this, right? A lot of good concept art um, for things like that, and then you just throw that up there, and that does basically the same thing. If you're not going to use the map for actual tracking of movement, right? So you can do that, or you can find there's like websites out there now that help you with descriptions, narrative descriptions of things, and you can use those. Or if you are a writer, if you're into writing, or if you're a very visual thinker who can put things into words like that, you can just describe it and bring out the mood like that. Use music and sound effects to good effect as well. Um, an interesting point about the exploration is the old school D&D modules. What you're actually supposed to do, you're not supposed to print out the map and cover up everything that hasn't been explored yet. What you could do is you can cut out all of the individual rooms into pieces and then just piece them together as the characters advance. But what is supposed to happen, and this is why when you read old D&D modules, they put a lot of emphasis on things like this room is exactly 40 feet long, and so on and so forth, is because, see, my idea was to draw the map like taking notes. As long as the DM is describing it well. Okay. So you draw the map while someone else is describing it to you. Exactly. That's the thing. So the GM describes to you, oh, you enter a room. It is 40 feet long and 30 feet wide, something like that. So you draw this room, right? The door you have entered is in the center of the south wall. Okay, so I do this. And then you typically draw this on grid paper where you establish something like one square is 10 feet. That is the old measurement, right? So you draw it like this. Uh, there is another door on the opposite side, on the opposite wall in the center as well, that leads out of the room. There are sconces for torches, empty sconces for torches along both side walls, four in each wall. And then you describe it like this, right? You describe, oh, these are the torch sconces, like here, and so on, and blah blah, and this is how you map. You have graph paper, and then you map things along, and then the GM just keeps describing, oh, the dungeon looks like this, da da da, and so on, and at some point you map the dungeon, and then you draw it all around here, and then you realize, hold on, The dungeon extends all around a ring like this. Is there something in the center? Is there a secret room there? And this is how you discover the presence of secret rooms, right? By essentially noticing gaps in the map and then realizing, hold on, right? There's a room over here that we have explored. There's a room over here. There's a corridor over here, and then there's another room over here, etc. But we haven't explored this space. Is there something here? And then you could go around and say, oh, maybe there's something with the torch sconces. And indeed, if you pull one of them and a secret door opens and boom, secret room, right? This is how you discover secret rooms. By mapping things out like this and then noticing these gaps in the map. Because usually old school D&D dungeons were very packed. They used all the space, right? Um, and this is how it works, right? So that's why you have one player as the mapper whose entire job is to listen carefully to these descriptions and then um to map out the dungeon. Also, which is why a lot of, or not a lot, but there were several old school D&D modules that where they mess with the players by having the dungeon shift. Um and so on, and that's, or like traps that separate the players or change the layout of corridors. Those are extremely nasty because now you can't no longer trust your map, and having your map is a big deal, right? Because it enables you to say, oh, hold on, there's a huge group of orcs in this room, we don't want to go in there because fighting is deadly. So if we somehow find a way, let's not go into there, let's circle around the room, etc., etc., right? And this is the kind of things you would do. um and that's, so really, when you have exploration like this, you're not giving the players the map, you're explaining it or describing it to them, and then they map it out themselves. Which is also how things like hex crawls tend to work, right? You have a hex map, and then depending on how precise you want it, if you want to like use the hexes to just measure distances or so, these hexes are not very regular, but that's okay. You can do things like, oh, there's a river flowing somewhere around here, we know that, and then there's a forest somewhere around here, right, on this side of the river. Okay, or there's a mountain, right? A mountain range that is somewhere over here, etc. Or if you use hexes as containers, in which every hex is a single environment, then the players can put that in the hexes, but you don't typically give them the full map, right? You might give them a map and say, okay, your town is over here, right? This is where you start, and you kind of sort of know somewhere there's a dungeon down here, maybe, right? That's a rumor that people have told you. Oh, there was an old abandoned temple to some nature god or something, but it's been overrun and overgrown, blah de blah. So you know somewhere south is maybe a dungeon of some sort of this lost, overgrown temple. It's like, okay, that's all we know. And maybe we can see the mountains, right? And we can see the forest from where we are. And we know this town is by a river, so we kind of know from traders how this river flows. Okay, but this is all you're getting. And then the rest, the party has to explore on their own, right? Um, Things like that. So that's a lot of how such maps work. Um, though, really, if you're doing a dungeon, um, what I've found, and this is another like mapping tip, what I've personally found is if I try to draw a dungeon on graph paper and such with all the corridors and rooms, the sizes and blah, putting in lots of detail, yes, it's an interesting and fun artistic endeavor, but for me it's very difficult to design a dungeon that way. It's much more hopeful for me to look at a dungeon as a like structurally first. So I can say, all right, there's an entrance here, and then it crosses, and then there's like a loop over here that goes like this, and then the dungeon continues. And these are all paths, right? Like so, and then I have another bit over here, and then this is another entrance, and like so, right? So this is an entrance, and this is an entrance. And basically what I'm doing here is I am designing the possible paths through the dungeon. So this is pretty complex, right? This layout is pretty complex. And then later on I can say, okay, well, I can place rooms and corridors and such wherever I want. By having this general layout. And I can say, well, maybe there is a big entry hall, right? So we start with this big entry hall over here that has this is supposed to be like stairs and such. And then there are two doors that lead out to the sides. It doesn't even have to be exactly like this. Maybe one of the doors is up here instead, right? This is just a rough guide. And then I have one corridor that leads here into a room, and then it leads up here. And then at some point, I know the corridors and rooms have to link up somehow in a loop. And then there's another loop over here, and then they have to loop again, right? Maybe it can be a series of rooms, or a corridor with rooms to the sides or something, or a small dead end with an extra room up here that doesn't do anything interesting. It's not even marked on my structure, on my layout. But why not? Right? And then I come down here into another room and so on, and it loops like this. And then I have a corridor over here. Heck, I can keep this door if I want. And then there's a big central room here, and then another corridor, and that's about it. And then I have like a boss fight room over there, or something more over here, and so on, right, and etc. And then another entrance over here, like so, right? And this allows me to structure the dungeon and make sure there are interesting paths. Because if you actually, this is a certain method. I forgot who created this, but it is on some RPG forum or so where it was being discussed, like how to actually identify the layout of dungeons. Because a lot of dungeons, especially more modern ones, if you look at their layout is essentially this. That's it, right? They have maybe like this interesting rooms or so on off to the side a little bit, but this is essentially it, right? This is the layout of most, or not most, but a lot of modern dungeons are just like this. Um, and this includes things like, oh, you have a big room here that leads into two small rooms here, right? Is this a loop? Not really. This is not really a loop. It's too small, right? Or worse yet, if this door wasn't in here, this is nothing. This is just a line through. Done. And these are just small side diversions that you don't even need to write into the structure. So a lot of dungeons are just this, and this is not very interesting. So this allows you to plan out paths through a dungeon first. And then enables you to do things like include loops, include multiple entrances, include other things like, oh, multiple ways down and up, right? Maybe you have over here a path that leads down to 2 or something, down to level 2. And then another path over here that leads down to level 3. And then a path over here that leads down to level 2 again, right? So various paths in here that go all over the place. Maybe this is also an entrance. Who knows, right? So now you have 3 entrances to this dungeon that lead to completely different ways of of tackling it, right? Do you enter through the big entrance hall? Do you enter through a small side entrance? Do you enter into a complex mess of loops, right? And so on and so forth. And if you go into here and you're like, no, this is too much. Let's head out and come in through the main entrance and see where that leads us, right? It gives players options, and um this is part of what is called jaquazing the dungeon. So now we're talking about dungeon design, but that's also okay. Jaquazing the dungeon by a very prolific dungeon designer, adventure writer, really, who has sadly passed away not too long ago, General Jaquays, who wrote a lot of very iconic dungeons, um, or adventures, really, with these iconic dungeons, um, back in like the early days of D&D, right, the 80s and 90s and such. And her dungeons had a lot of these features, right? Multiple entrances, lots of loops and choices, various ways of getting to different levels, right? And skipping a level here or there, um, and and so on. So there's um, a lot of these features going in there, and it makes the dungeon interesting to explore, and it gives the players choices, right? Because if you have a dungeon like this, it's like, oh, you come in through here and this is the other big exit, and then you have two side rooms. There's not really a lot of choice, right? It's either do we kind of clear out everything, or do we just continue with the dungeon, right? It's kind of like, I don't know, you're in a mall and you just walk along the mall the whole time. It's like, do I pop into this store or this store or this store or this store? Uh, it's not really a meaningful choice, right? Because once you're in this store and you've looked around, maybe bought something, you come back out, oh well, you only have a single choice left, and that is to continue, really, if you don't want to backtrack, right? And head back out. Um, so there is no real consequential big choice being made here that makes the exploration of the dungeon itself interesting. Um, Whereas if you have loops like this, it's like, do the players uh go go this way or do they go this way? Well, both of those can eventually lead them to the stairs down, but they will have different adventures along the way, right? And then here they can go up here, and then here they can advance to the next routes and so on. And then eventually they might loop around and be like, oh, hey, we came back to where we started. Okay. But that was a choice at every turn, right? A meaningful choice at every turn. So this is how you can make dungeons by focusing on the structure first and not necessarily on making the rooms, like making a pretty map, essentially. You can always do that, sure. um I personally find it easier to focus on the structure, and then once I have the structure, then when I do the pretty map, I can focus on the pretty map itself, right? And so on. So yeah, um that's about this. And really, exploration um can be like this as well. Like, if you're exploring something like a mansion, right? Um, do you need the players to crawl through it room by room? Well, if you're running it like a dungeon, sure. So help me improve my caves or dungeon making. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, it's it's very much like, because we only see the end product, right? We only see the pretty map in the books and such and online. Um the process is completely hidden. So focusing on structure, and there's more. There's focusing on things like the theme of the dungeon. What was it before? What is it now? Right? There's more about the history. Like maybe it used to be an underground dwelling of some underground people, but now it's been turned into, I don't know, cult headquarters or something. What were the old rooms? How were they repurposed? And if you establish these things first, it helps you with drawing the map, putting in details, and also while you're describing, you kind of notice, okay, if it was an underground town in a way, what kind of rooms or such buildings does it need? Would it have had? And now that it's been repurposed, how did they repurpose it? So when I get into a room, I can help describe. It helps me describe these or come up with reasons for things to be there, right? Um, that can help as well. Um, or was I? Oh yeah, if you're not exploring a dungeon, like dungeon can be a lot of different things. Right? It doesn't have to be an underground cave. It can be things like a mansion or a castle ruin. It can be heck a town if you're good. You can turn some sort of town into a dungeon. It can be a natural cave system. It can be anything, right? Um, but that doesn't mean that you have to run everything automatically as a dungeon, right? A dungeon tends to be certain things like it tends to be unknown to you and to people you are helping or who are helping you. It tends to be dangerous, meaning every next door you open or every next room you enter, every next step down a corridor could lead to danger. Um, or uh, like there is usually something there to find or to do, right? Rescue people, find treasure, etc., etc. Right? All of these things, um, which are not always the case, right? You could have an underground town that is just a normal town. It just happens to be underground. Would you run that as a dungeon? I hope not. You would run that as a normal town. Maybe it's just a dwarven town somewhere that's in a cave system, and then you go, and then the players enter it. They manage to get in because they've proven themselves friends to the dwarves, and then they go, "Oh, let's check out the tavern." Then you just say, "All right." You explore around a little bit, see a lot of the dwarven inhabitants, and then find the tavern. It's called, I don't know, the honking squirrel. I have no idea. And then you go in, and there's surprisingly merry music and a lot of dwarves sitting around playing dice and drinking ale. What do you do? Etc. Etc. Right? And then you just run it like that. You don't have to go. All right, you finally made it into this town. There is a big entry hall with some guards, a guard post there, and some market stalls, and there are two exits, one to the left, one to the right. Which one do you take? Right? It's a bit weird running a friendly town like that where they have to explore it bit by bit. You just run it as any normal town. You make a list of the shops that are in there, list of important NPCs, etc. And then the players would say, "Oh, I want to visit the blacksmith because I want to get a new sword." Like, okay, you find the next blacksmith, and then blah blah blah. He says, "Oh, how can I help you?" Da, 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 and then, and so on and so forth, right? And so you don't have to run everything as a dungeon, including things like places that are dangerous but need not be mapped out like this. So I recently ran a game set in a not haunted mansion, but like a still a mansion. It was a Cthulhu game, right? So it was like Eldritch horror and such. But I never gave the players a map. I didn't have a map. What I had, not really. What I had was I had a list of, okay, this is the mansion, who lives in here, blah blah blah, how big is it roughly? And all I then had was, okay, first floor. It has the kitchen. It has the dining room, right? Kitchen has stairs to wine cellar, etc. Right, and then it has the dining room. It has the entry, the foyer. It has, I don't know, the study, right, and it has the lounge. And then second floor, it has guest rooms, right? One per PC. It has the master bedroom, uh, etc., etc. And then I just did this, and if any linking is necessary, like I could say, okay, the entry is linked to the lounge, and the lounge is linked to the study, right? If that was necessary, but the players were very much free to just walk around as they wished. Sure, they had some sort of time pressure going on, and there was danger in not danger in the house, but like there were dangerous objects lying around, for example. Like if they interacted with certain things, then danger would come. But it wasn't like, oh, there were just monsters waiting in certain rooms ready to pounce on them, and then I have to know exactly which room they enter first and which room they cross to get to where, etc. So if they just tell me, oh yeah, we want to check out the master bedroom, see where the hosts are, right? Then I say, okay, you find the master bedroom, the door's unlocked, you step in and it's empty, blah 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 blah, and so on and so forth, right? And and they didn't have to like describe, okay, we first go through that door and now we're in this room and then we go through that door, because they were free to walk around. And if the players are basically free to walk around in a town or in a haunted mansion like this, there's no need for a precise oops. There's no need for a precise map. In fact, I feel like in this case, a map would have been detrimental because it would have put the players very much into this tactical thinking, right? It's like if you give the players a map, um, it puts a certain expectation of what kind of game are we playing right now, right? And it might that you might then say, okay, I we need to first walk through here. Wait, but if we want to go from here to the master bedroom, we can either go through the study or we can go through here or whatever. It's like, which way do we want to go? And suddenly these choices that don't actually matter might suddenly come up for whatever reason because you gave them this map. Whereas if you just list them, you can hand them the list of rooms even, right? Or you can just tell them and then they write it down. Um, but they can just say, yeah, no, okay, we searched the master bedroom. Let's go down to the kitchen again. I think there was like someone still down there. Let's talk to them, see if they've cleared up a bit. Da da da. And then you says, okay, you just you know exactly where the stairs are because you walked up them when you went to your guest rooms there. And the kitchen is next to the dining room, very obviously, and so on. So you just go there, no problem, right? So yeah, it's like, okay, you're in the kitchen and the person is still sitting there, da, 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 and so on. So you don't have to give them maps. So this is you can give them like images, and this is like the inspiration, the mood images and such. You can give them images of certain rooms, for example, or if there's certain objects or so, like there's an altar to a forgotten a god somewhere in one of the rooms in the bedroom or something, then you can find an image of this, right, with like half melted candles and like weird scrawled writing in blood along the wall above it, etc. And you can give them an image like that, to help spur their to like put their imagination or help out their imagination. But a map, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I've done both. I've run an earlier game years ago in D&D where same basic idea. There was a party uh, in a noble's mansion, and I went and found a map, and then I gave this map to the players, and they immediately said, "Oh, what's in this room? What's in that room? I want to go into that room over there." And then I all of a sudden I had to be like, "Uh-oh, I had to come up with a lot of irrelevant stuff just because the map happened to have all of these rooms on there, right? Whereas if I had just told them, yeah, no, there's this big uh, ballroom basically that everyone is in, and there is the kitchen and a dining room, and then there's a galley up top around on the second floor um, where guests are mingling. Done, right? Then I didn't have to come up with all of these side things happening everywhere. It's like, oh, what's out in the garden? It's like, ah, crap! Now I have to think of what's in the garden and such. I didn't really prepare all of that, and so yeah, it made this whole thinking of, oh, I'm gonna go into this room, and then let's split up. I go here, I go there, I go there. It's like, oh no, what is happening? I can't run this. So that was I made more work for myself by actually using a map. Um, and I spend a lot of time looking for a fitting map. That's also like, yeah, I could have used that time instead to prep things like a guest list or topics of conversation and so on and so forth. So maps, use them with purpose is essentially what I'm trying to say, right? Use them with purpose. So I can kind of sort of do like kind of this up here is where a map is basically essential, and the further down you go, the less essential it becomes. Um, and even like in a dungeon, for example, you don't have to give them exact measurements. You don't have to give them exact lengths. You just say you enter a big room. You go down a long, narrow corridor. This room is tiny and it's circular, barely wide enough for two of you to stand side by side. That can be enough, right? And then they don't need a map like the green one I've drawn here. They can have a map that is more like, okay, this is the entry hall. There's a corridor over here that makes a sharp turn left. We enter a small circular room. And then this circular room has two more exits that lead here. Okay, and now there's another room over here, and etc. Right? You can totally write a dungeon like this and map out a dungeon like this and have the players map it out like this. Um, Especially if you run with the style that things like corridors tend to be less interesting. Usually ad is okay, the ad is gonna hit soon. Um, this is another big topic of like, what do you actually put in the rooms? How do you do the rooms and corridors and such? Do you split them up? You can. Some people say a corridor is just a long, narrow room. Sure, but at that point, you immediately increase the amount of rooms you have in your dungeon, and that can slow down play by a lot, especially if you do things like put random traps into the middle of corridors. If there was just a random trap over here, right? And this is near the beginning of the dungeon, so the players come in, deal with whatever's in this room, right? And then go here, and then they run into the trap. First thing in this random corridor, what's gonna happen? Well, they are gonna slow the heck down and search every single millimeter of this corridor, this room, and this corridor, and this corridor, and everything else. They will search everything for traps because they ran into a random trap right in the middle of some random corridor, right? Um, that's what's gonna happen because you've trained them to say random traps can happen in corridors. Uh, Whereas if you just say corridors are just connectors, man, we don't care. Then the rooms are the important thing. That can cut down on your prep. That can make running the dungeon easier because it's just like, oh, we exit through here and we go to the next room. Okay, done. You're here now. And the corridor in between, well, that's just to give the dungeon a bit of shape and say, oh, this corridor is very long and the walls feel like they're pressing in, and you can give atmosphere, but nothing interesting is going to happen there, right? Same with things like secret doors. If you put a secret door in this random corridor. Uh, and it's a necessary secret door, which is something you should never do. Again, you train your players to look for secret doors everywhere now. So every corridor, every room, everything. So is that something you want? Maybe, but be aware that this is what you're doing, right? Okay, the ad is gonna hit any moment now. I need to get up real quick, have a stretch, go to the bathroom and such. I will be right back. So I will see you all in a couple minutes. Okay. We're back? I think so. All right. Okay. So, yeah. Just talked a lot about dungeon mapping more than design. Um Different ways of running dungeons. Again, there is no right or wrong. It's just some things that are helpful that or that could be helpful that aren't really mentioned in a lot of places, especially not if you only look at finished results and such. Um, and I don't know, maybe your players really enjoy linear dungeons and they don't want to make all of these choices. Or maybe you're running a dungeon for complete noobs. In which case, yeah, you might only want 3 rooms in a row or so, right? You have a room here, then you have a room here, and then you have a room here. Done. Right? Maybe that's all you want. Because anything more than that, and it becomes too complex for complete newbies who are just getting into the game, right? They're already making a lot of choices or learning new things concerning like, oh, character abilities and how do I even role play or what are all these funky dice, right? You don't also want to overload them with choices like this. It's just like you're in this room, there's an exit on the opposite end. And in this room there's 2 skeletons. Oh my god, fight, right? Hey, awkward pain. Hi. Thank you for the stretch redeemed. How's it going? Oh, okay. We're talking about dungeons because why not? Tired, been a long day, week. Oof. I feel that. I've also like this weekend. I wanted to go to the gym and such, and then I just slept forever and was like, if I go to the gym, I will collapse. Let's not. So, yeah. Ugh. In fact, I'm still tired. It became really hot today, yesterday as well. Um, so it's not great. Hold on. Ah, let me just save this real quick. I realize I haven't saved this yet. Okay, but uh, I hope you'll be able to get some rest soon. Busy season should hopefully be over for you, right? Um, we're getting a ton of storms, which is fun for me. Oof. Oh, that sounds that can sound very stressful. I don't mind storms over here because everything here is kind of built for storms. Um, and then it cools down, which is nice. I'd rather prefer storms than this stifling heat that we have now. Um, but yeah, it's definitely where you live. Um, Makes a huge impact. Right. Thinking, thinking. Where was I? My brain is starting to slow down slightly. I'm feeling I can't go too long today. I still have to prepare for teaching later on. So I need to keep that one in mind. So we'll see how much we'll get done today. It's just talking, talking and Q&A and just discussing some ideas on how to different ways, really, not how to, but like different ways you can use, different methods you can use to help you prep things. Um, there's another helpful tool that is called the 5 room dungeon. Um, and basically it says this dungeon has five, is it 5 rooms? It's more like 5 elements that can each be their own room. Um, and that is, let me see if I can still get it. It's the guardian at the entrance. There's the I forgot. I forgot the exact order. There's a challenge, like a trick challenge, which is like the or a role-playing encounter. There's like the puzzle or something. There's the boss fight, and then there's the twist, right? And so on. And there's a lot of good analysis on the 5 room dungeon, how to best use it, where it falls slightly short, and so on. So there's a lot of material on there, and just recently there was a 5 room dungeon creating jam where a whole bunch of people, RPG creators, made 5 room dungeons, and it's all collected in this jam. So yeah, there's a lot of good material for that, and it's a good exercise, right? It's like if you don't have any ideas, there's probably even generators online. A template. Yes, thank you. That's the word. A template. There's even 5 room dungeon generators out there, right? It's basically like random name generators. It's just like, oh, let's just put together these 5 things for these rooms, and then boom, done. Here's your dungeon. Um, and you can prepare it in like 10 to 15 minutes maybe, and then you can run it over the course of an evening. Very, very simple stuff. So there's a lot of very easy to get into beginner things for creating dungeons, and then it really goes down very deep. There's a whole bunch more that you can do, like how do you properly use traps, how do you properly use secret doors, random encounters, things like moving encounters, right? An adversary list, restocking, mega dungeons, dungeon crawl procedures, etc., etc., etc. There's so much that you can do to this that the rabbit hole goes very, very deep. Um, but really, the 5 room dungeon is a good starting point, and then if you want to get the most bang for your buck, jaquazing the dungeon. If you just look up this term, jaquazing the dungeon, you'll find a lot of articles out there and such. Um, and like probably even video tutorials and such by this point, or like people discussing Danielle Jaquay's work, and the types of dungeons she created and so on. Definitely a lot. Um, so these two would be the big things. Um, yeah. What else? So we talked about maps, when to use them, how to use them, why to use them, creating your own, and then mainly dungeons, because dungeons are big things that use maps. Never heard of the term. I'll look into it a bit. Yeah, it's based on it's a name, right? General Jaquays. It's her name. And she was known for making right or the old adventures she created had a lot of dungeon maps that had a lot of cool features in them, and then over time these features were then collected, or people were saying, oh yeah, this is a cool thing. If you make your dungeons this way, they can become a lot more interesting. And she's not necessarily the first, but she is probably the most prolific one who did this. Ow, my eye is itching. What the heck? Ow. Sorry. Ah, you ever get that where your eye is like dry and irritated and such, and then you have to scratch it? Not the eyeball, but like the eyelids and such. It's just comfortable. And it's not like there's a hair or something in there. That feels completely different. It really is just the eye is completely irritated. Uh yeah, it's not great. It's not great. Okay. Um Staring at a screen is probably not helping, but I can't help myself. Um I think that's I can't think of anything right now concerning maps. So main point is know why you're using a map and if you actually need to use a map, right? Actually, the map itself is not as critical. It's also a lot of times it's compromise, right? You are looking for a a fitting map that exists somewhere out there, and sometimes the map you find is not gonna fit 100%, it's only gonna fit like 90%, and you go, good enough, and you just use that. So, whatever. But like the reasons why you're using the map, how you're using the map is more important. There are definitely some things about published maps that I absolutely despise. Things like complex cave systems that don't do anything. It's like I find this in a lot of D&D works, strangely. Third edition, fourth edition, fifth edition, etc. They all have this. And that's essentially you have a dungeon inside a natural cave, and then one part of the cave, so you have some sort of dungeon down here, da 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 da, and then some part of the cave just starts looking like this, which is like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? How do I describe this to players? You move 10 feet forward, and then there's a side corridor that kind of angles at the 10 o'clock position ish that goes off for another 15 feet before coming to a dead end. Okay, is there anything in there? Nope. But I had to describe it to you because it's on the map. Right? So I see this a lot. And it's just like, sure, it looks cool on a map, on a drawing, but actually running this in game feels like pain, absolute pain, especially uh if you've described the rest of the dungeon very meticulously, saying, "Oh, this room is hold on, I know." Sorry. It's needless detail, confuse the player sometimes. Yes, especially if you've run the dungeon up to this point saying, "Oh, this room is like, yeah, 40 feet by 30 feet," and so on. There's a door there and there, and then this corridor is 10 feet wide and stretches 45 feet into the darkness, da, 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 and so on. And there is a map in the 5th edition. Is it the Dungeon Master's Guide? Uh, that is a cave system. Let me see if I can find it. I think I have the electronic versions of the books. Um, like I think in the 4th edition D&D, 4th, 5th edition D&D Dungeon Master's Guide. In the very back, I think they have a couple of maps, just random maps for you to use. Uh Is it here? And one of the maps is just a natural cave system full of twists and turns. Uh oh, this is a good one. Hold on. I can't find it right now, but I did find another map. Copy image. Is it in the player's handbook even maybe? Player's handbook. Does the player's handbook have maps in the back? I don't know. I haven't touched these books a lot because I don't like them too much. But yeah, so essentially she just ran it as okay, there's a corridor. And then it turns left a bit. Okay, we go down this way. And then it turns right a bit. Okay, it goes down this way. No, more to the right. Right? It's a sharper angle. Okay, and then we draw that, and then it opens up again. There's two ways. Okay, we go right. You're back to where you started, and so on. So she just described every little piece, every little bend and such, and like it didn't do anything, right? It's just wasting a lot of time doing like, oh, you're just walking this way, then walking a little bit that way, and so on. Like, did it actually help with running a fun adventure? I don't think so. And it's not no shade to her. Like she was completely new. She had just started playing, and it was like her first time DMing and such. And she was just like, "Oh yeah, there's this map in the book. Let me use it. Why not?" Right? But it would be essentially like, uh, you're in a city, right? In one of those American gridded cities, and it's like, okay, you're at the corner of, I don't know, 5th and Main. Okay, we go further up Main. Now you're at the corner of 6th and Main. We go further up. Okay, now you're at the corner of 7th and Main. Okay, we go further up. Okay, now we're at the corner of 8th and Main. Do you run a city like that? You can. Is it interesting? Eh? Right? Uh, this map. Oops. Okay, let me make it fit a bit better on the screen. So this map is in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Right? It's in the Dungeon Master's Guide in the 5th edition, the old one, not the 2024 version, right? So, okay. So I was just saying, let's look at this dungeon and look at dungeons and look at modern dungeons and see how they are actually structured, right? How are they interesting or not? Uh I like parts of this. Yeah, kind of, but if we actually look at this thing, is it actually interesting? So let me make this pen a little bit thicker so that we can see. Let me use a different color. Let me use blue. Okay, so I'm guessing the entrance is down here, right? The entrance is down here. And the C stands for concealed door. The S stands for secret door. Okay, so far so good. And there's also a random pit trap and a secret tunnel. Secret tunnel. I have the brain rot. Okay, what do we get? So this looks like there's a lot happening here, but really all we're getting is a straight line here, right? With a kind of sort of concealed loop that maybe leads this way. And then there is a small side bit out here. And then there is a small side bit out here. Is this a loop? Again, with a concealed loop. right? If you don't find these concealed doors, it's not a loop. And then what? Then we go up here and there's a secret door. So effectively, the dungeon ends here. Don't do this! Oh my god! Now I know why so many dungeon designs are bad. Because the actual dungeon in the back of the DMG has this. This dungeon comes in two halves, right? So essentially you have this half over here. And if you look, this is two halves. There is no way between the upper portion of the dungeon and the lower portion of the dungeon except through this one secret door. Yeah? We all agree on that? There's no other connection. Nowhere. If the players do not find the secret door, you only have half the dungeon. If they do not find this secret door, there is no lower level. Congratulations. Now, if there's a boss fight in here or something, or if there's a vital clue in here, uh, sucks to be you, I guess. You never notice that. I know it's so easy to overlook unless you're actually looking for it. And this is not the first time I'm seeing this. There is another dungeon, in one of the Fandelver quests. I think it's is it the Fandelver? No, it's the next one after that. What is the one that comes after? Is it the one in the starter set? Lost Mine of Fandelver? Let me check real quick. No, it's not this one. It was a different adventure, but it had basically the same thing. Yeah, Fandelver is the level 1 adventure, but it was a different adventure? Was it the Descent into Avernus? Was it that one? I think, let me just look real quick. Oh god, it is. It is. Wow. Okay. Dang, dang. Okay, okay, okay. Same issue. Same issue. Okay, we don't need the whole thing. No, first I need to make this smaller. We don't need the entire thing here. We only need the dungeon. How do I crop this? Like so. Okay, we only need the dungeon. Uh, exactly the same issue. 100%. Can you spot it? Let me make the whole thing a bit bigger again. Do you see? Like when I looked at this map, again, because I look for these things, right? Because I've read enough about dungeon design and read enough about how bad modern dungeon design is that I spotted this immediately. Um, but essentially, I saw it because I was looking for it, right? But do you see it? This is in the Descent to Avernus, one of the more highly celebrated adventures for D&D that came out. Do you spot the problem in this dungeon map? So the entrance is over here, right? The entrance is here. You get this bathhouse that you explore, and then already there's a secret door here, right? That's not the big issue. The secret door, I think I haven't fully read the description of this dungeon, but already there's a secret door, right? That leads here, and then there's a stairs down that leads into the dungeon. So this is the entrance to the dungeon. right? And then this is the main thing, and so on. And I think the boss is like somewhere in here. I think that's where the boss sits. Let me use a different color. Or where like vital clues are and such. This is the end of the dungeon, right? This kind of looks like an ending room. And you get the rest of the dungeon. It gets bottlenecked again. Right here. Again, this dungeon comes in 2 parts. Yeah? It's right here. There's a small S. I'm not sure if it's very clear on the stream. Right here. There's an S. Right? It's sideways, but it's the S for secret door. And I actually read the text for this particular secret door. And it says, yeah, no, this secret door is just a DC something to find it. Done. Nothing else. Nothing else about it. There are other things later on, I think, maybe, that talks about, oh, what if the PCs don't find the secret door? But the issue is you placed in a secret door, you caused the problem to yourself, and now you're trying to band-aid the problem that you yourself caused. Right? But exactly the same issue. I don't know why dungeon designers, modern dungeon designers for D&D love it so much, but they absolutely adore putting in single secret doors that cut the dungeon in half like this. I don't get it. They were probably like, yo, we need a secret door. Because secret doors are a thing. We have perception checks to look for them. Let's put them in there. Like, there's another secret door in this dungeon that's over here. This is not a bad secret door. This is actually a pretty good one because you can come in, right? You have the normal path through here, and then you can explore back here, and then the players might realize, hold on. Huh? Maybe? Right? If they don't find this secret door, it's all okay. If they do find it, hey, look, they just found a loop, another shortcut or something, right? Cool. But this is a good secret door. This is a secret door that has the potential to grind the entire campaign to a halt. If you miss a magic item, cool. If you can't find your boss or plot, bad. Yes. And given that this is a campaign, right? A campaign that's supposed to lead players through from level 1 to level, I don't even know, 15, something like that. And this is in the first town. This is the first dungeon, really, in the entire game. Good luck. Like, seriously, good luck. If the players roll poorly, that's it. Time to pack up and pick out another book, plan another campaign. Good job. So this is already bad. But the dungeon design runs the same way. So if they do find the secret door, right? And we go up here, and then what do we get? We get another secret door up here. Like, holy heck, there's so many up here, right? And then a concealed door over here, which means we have the main path kind of goes this way down here. And then there is kinda sorta another loop over here, right? And you could say, right, so there's a little bit extra over here. Now if we draw this out, yeah, exactly. You failed your perception of Avernus Winds. Done. I know you're just level 1, maybe level 2, but you just lost the campaign. Good job. If we draw this out as one of those structures that we had, right? So we enter here, we get this, and then we get this, 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 and this. Does this look like an interesting dungeon structure to you? I guess there is this bit over here. So it kind of leads into the loop, to this hidden loop. But that's it. That is essentially it. This is the dungeon structure. Right? So we have a loop over here that's self-contained. We have a loop over here that loops back into the main branch. And all of these loops are concealed, right? They're all blocked off by concealed or secret doors. If you don't find them, the loop doesn't exist. Right? So that's already eh. And then we get something a little bit more interesting up here. But that's it. This is the dungeon structure. That's fairly linear. That's fairly linear. Right? You basically just walk in one way and done. You get to the end, finished. And this is the example dungeon in the Dungeon Master's Guide that every beginner GM gets. Right? Similar here. We have this bit, then we go down here. This is a little bit more interesting because we actually get a proper loop over here. And then we go here, and then we get a branch off here, up here, right? But again, you have this bit going into here. You get this here. You have a loop over here that branches out, and then we get a path here, like so. This is the secret door, right? Again, this is the secret door over here. And then that's it. That's the dungeon. Right? Again, very linear. Very, very linear. We have a single loop over here. And excuse me, we have the hidden concealed loop again over here, right, with this secret door. And that's it. Or I guess I can draw it like this, and then the actual way back is hidden. But you know, yeah, same difference. So this is what I mean when I say a lot of these modern dungeons are extremely linear. Right? If you like, and this is why drawing out the structure is very helpful, because if you look at this map, the pretty map that you have in the book, right? If I hide this, if you just look at the pretty map that we have in the book, oh, this looks very complex. There's a lot of twists and turns and different rooms, especially this one. It's like, holy heck, this is a big maze, right? This is a lot going on here. And then you look at where the players can actually go and what kinds of meaningful decisions they actually have in this dungeon. And you see, not much. Not much. I guess there's another branch over here that leads down, right? Okay, so this one, but again, secret door. So this might as well be a dead end. And that's it. But overall, it's very linear. It's just like a branch here that leads to a dead end, a branch there that leads to a dead end, a loop that is hidden, right? And that's it. So very, very linear, these dungeons. So this is why it's helpful to first draw the structure. Never thought about this way before. Yeah, this is not something that a lot of places really teach. Like I had to dig deep. I've been reading years of blog posts and articles and watching videos and such before I learned all of this stuff. Um, so yeah, this is, but it's not. It didn't take me years to read because it's so complex. It took me years of reading because this info is just hidden in niche sites that just very dedicated fans who know these things exist even look for. Right? If you're just a newbie GM who's running for the first time and all you have is a Dungeon Master's Guide, because hey, that's supposed to teach me, right? This is from the biggest role-playing game in the entire world in the history of the universe, and this is the guide for me, for the Dungeon Master. This will teach me how to run the game, right? And then you get this. This explains a lot. This explains so much. Um, yeah, it really is just It's not great. Which is why I said think about the structure of your dungeon first. And really, once you start going, right, you can put loops in there, you can put travels um different levels. Like some stairs go down to level 2, some might go down to level 3, right? Or maybe there's a big well, a big hole in the ground, and if you climb down or fall down, you go straight down to level 8. Good luck, bozo, right? Things like that. Whatever. You can have incremental height changes where something that is the same level of the dungeon ends up looping in on itself. There's kind of sort of something like this over here, right? Where you have stairs what do we call this? Like mezzanine stairs, in level stairs. So stairs that don't change what dungeon level you're on, right? These stairs over here and these stairs over here are fundamentally different, right? This doesn't change the level of the dungeon you're on. But then you get the secret tunnel that runs here, so it creates a kind of loop-ish, right? But you can have that. You can have a dungeon where you get a corridor and then it goes up slightly, but you're still kind of in the same level. Maybe it's a very gentle rise and the PCs don't even realize that they've gone up very slightly, which is why a dwarf in original D&D and earlier editions was able to tell depth underground as a dwarven ability, right? To discover things like this, because back then dungeons had things like this. So it was very useful to have a character who could tell, whoa, we just went up a slight incline. We are now 3 meters higher than we were, even though to us it still looks like the same dungeon level. And then you can have a room over here where it goes down and then you loop around, right? Um, and then come out, but it's still the same. And then the players will go, huh? Didn't we just go down a level? Why are we still in the same level, right? Things like this. You can have things in there to confuse players and make the dungeon more interesting, right? Things like that. Uh, and such. You can do that, and it really helps um to look at some older, especially anything by Janelle Jacques. One of her biggest, is it Caverns of Thracia? Is that what it's called? Caverns of Thracia? Yes, Caverns of Thracia, 1979, uh published back then. So Caverns, let me just write that down. Caverns of Thracia, one of the most iconic dungeon adventures, and it was written by General Jacques. And a lot of these Jacquesing the dungeon tips and features are present in this dungeon, right? So you can look at that. Um, yeah. So this is like how to think about your dungeons, um, and why these are bad examples. Like seriously, yeah, I'll be looking into that. Yeah, definitely. It is like that shows you how good, like how interesting a dungeon itself can be. It's not just a series of rooms and you try to make the encounters inside interesting and you try to throw in 10 million details make it interesting? No, the layout of the dungeon itself is fascinating. Um, but yeah, don't do this. Don't do this. Don't. Just don't. This is the worst way to use secret doors. Um, and especially if you use this once in an early dungeon, and then the players realize, oh heck, there's a whole second half of the dungeon, including boss fights, including crucial information, including awesome treasure behind the secret door that was just randomly here. And like this, if I hide this layer, this secret door over here, at least there is a corridor leading up to it that just ends. Right? All other corridors in this dungeon kind of end in some sort of room. So here is there's a long corridor and just kind of ends. Then players might think, is there a secret door here? Maybe. Right? This could clue them in. Over here in this dungeon, no. Nothing of the sort. In fact, the dungeon suggests that there's nothing else. It just continues and oh look, there's 3 more rooms here. Awesome. Right? And that's it. That's just it. There's nothing here that clues the players into the fact that there should be a secret door here. The layout is not strange in any way, right? Like this over here on the left side is not great, but this on the right side is just you're asking for trouble. You're asking for players to just end the adventure right there. Right? So just don't do it. This is a bad use of secret doors. Um yeah, just um so that's definitely something to think about when designing dungeons. Um yeah, is there anything else that I can think of? So I didn't find the map I wanted to look for, but that's okay. It was essentially just a whole mess of a cave system with lots of branches and maze-like structures and such. Um, I can't find it right now. Yeah, it's okay. Um, yeah, okay. Was there anything else? I don't think there's anything much concerning mapping and such to talk about. Um, that was the wrong thing to press. Oh, okay. Okay. Um, and like just artistically, there are a lot of guides out there, or there are a lot of mapping programs, even, right? Uh, heck, you can probably use some video games that have dungeon mapping or like map building in them to map out your dungeons and make them look pretty, right? That's relatively trivial um compared to laying out the dungeon and planning it and structuring it, right? Things like that. Uh so yeah, while we're on the topic of dungeons, uh we talked a lot about the maps and the layout. Then there's things like other things to note. What was this place before? right? And this gives you clues to like uh the layout and basic features. Things like how many rooms does it probably have? What kinds of rooms are likely in here? Um, what were they used for, right? What things might still be present? Did it need a fresh water source? Did it need multiple entrances? Well, every dungeon should probably have multiple entrances. That's what makes them interesting, right? Things like that. Um, or uh like terrain. And then I, I I'm gonna call it permanent features. So if a dungeon used to be a tomb, there are probably still the tombs around, right? Those aren't very easily just taken out of the dungeon. They might still be in there even after it's been repurposed, right? Um, what is it used for now? By whom? Right? So this tells you current features, inhabitants, and repurposing. So maybe your dungeon used to be some sort of mine, and then in that mine they had a forge and such ready to do things like fix tools or begin like the first smelting process, right? To smelt things into more easily transportable ingots and so on. And now it's been taken over by other people, I don't know, seeking refuge, and they have no use for a forge, but they may have use for a kitchen. So now they repurposed all of the uh forging stations as cooking stations. Why not, right? You can light a fire in them. They're nice and big. They keep the place warm, and you can cook things on there, right? And so on. Mm. And that can immediately give your dungeon a lot of flavor, right? Then players can say, "Ah, right. So it makes sense there where all their food is burned." Well, if you don't have to fire up the forge completely, but you have a sturdy place that is meant to hold fire inside, right? And then you can put in like some firewood and then use it as an oven, right? To bake some bread, etc. I don't know. You don't, but you can have things like that. Um, and then players can see, right, yes, so the mine was here. We can still see the tracks for all the mine carts down here. But now this forging station, there's people cooking food. Why not? So that means these are not the original inhabitants. They're not using this place for its original purpose. And that adds a lot of flavor, right? Um, and the same with things that we discussed last time with preparing campaigns in general. You can do that for like more complex locations as well, including dungeons. So things like major players, right? Who is in there? Important NPCs or monsters or such. Maybe there are factions in a dungeon. If you have a very large dungeon that is just being used by people to live in, having factions in the dungeon immediately makes the entire adventure um, more interesting. Especially since, and this is a lot of stories, older dungeons, again, a lot of older dungeons had this. They had factions in their dungeons. Right, a very common example is, oh, there's goblins and kobolds, and they're both occupying the same dungeon, but the goblins are in this half, the kobolds are in this half, and they're in a kind of stalemate right now where they're each kind of keeping to themselves with like a border skirmish every month or so where they kind of show the other side, we're still here,
right? Which makes the whole situation the perfect powder keg. So the PCs then stumble into this, and then maybe they go left instead of right and start murdering a bunch of goblins. And then the kobolds are like, hold on, the goblins are being murdered. Let's get ready to take them over, right? And then and then, or I don't know, they stumble into the goblins and are like, we're not here to fight you, we're looking for this object. And then the goblins are like, the kobolds have that object, help us fight them and you can keep it, and so on. It's like, oh, okay. And then you ally with one of the factions to fight against the other faction in the dungeon. There are a lot of stories of like older D&D and older role playing such that run along these lines, because a lot of older dungeons were designed this way, where you had factions in the dungeon, uh, including like big mega adventures and such, where you had different factions there, and then other people there. They're just kind of there. Did they serve a purpose? Not necessarily, but they made the world more colorful, and the PCs could interact with them, and that's all that matters, right? So you can have that in there. Um, Things like uh placement of traps, secret doors, etc. Think very carefully how you use them. You don't want to train your players to search every single centimeter of the dungeon because they stumbled into a trap within the first 10 minutes. And then the remaining 3 hours of your game night is spent searching every single tile of every single corridor because, hey, we ran into that trap early on. There could be more, right? You don't want the game to devolve into that. And then you don't want to break character as a GM and be like, guys, out of character, trust me, there are no more traps. It's like, that feels bad, right? Then why did you place that trap all the way in the beginning? Yeah. Right? So think very carefully why you're doing this, how you're doing this. And then you can have something like an adversary roster or list where you make the dungeon dynamic, right? Uh Make the dungeon dynamic. So what this means is, usually how dungeons are planned out is you have all of the rooms everywhere, and then you place encounters into these rooms, and every room is its own isolated dimension, really, right? If you're doing something in another room in a dungeon, you usually make the first trap pretty obvious. Yeah, that's one way to do it. Or you keep placing the same trap over and over and over again at the exact same kind of spots. So there's one example that I heard where a GM placed a trap underneath every single door. Right, so the first door the PCs walk through, the trap triggered. It's like, okay. And then the second door they search, and then they find the trap. The third door they search, they find the trap. The exact same trap under every single door. And then at that point they go, okay, I know what's happening here. Right? So they search every single door, find the trap, or now they know how to avoid it. They don't have to explicitly search for it, and so on. And then, or they can just say, you know what? By now we know every door has a trap. We just do the same thing. And then a dungeon master's like, okay, fair, right? You have learned this now about the dungeon. And then later on in the dungeon, they find a door with a trap that's already been sprung. Like, ooh, what's happening here now, right? Then you can do things like this. But yeah, an adversary roster make dungeons dynamic. I probably have to get to this point after the break because the ad is about to start. So I'm just gonna head to be right back real quick. Have a quick stretch and such, and then I will get into this point after the ad break, and then I will have to think about ending it sooner rather than later. So yeah. Yeah, I will see you all in a couple minutes. we back? We're back. All right. Awesome. Ads are acting really weird. They're starting the upper right corner. Then after the first one is gone to full screen and stream was put in the upper. Huh. Okay. That is really weird. Like I mean, the whole stream gets punted up into the upper right corner, and then the ad is on the full screen. That part I've seen before. But at that point, you can pop out the stream. You can still pop out the stream and increase the size and still watch normally. Like you can't hear anything, but if it's something like words on screen, words on stream or something, can still play normally, which is pretty cool. But I've never seen the reverse where there's an ad in the upper right corner. Maybe, I mean, Twitch is always trying to make ads quote unquote better. Better for whom? I don't know. Ultimately for them, I guess. So they're always toying with different things. I don't know, maybe something they just want to get more ads appearing. Yeah. They also want these banner ads that like push the stream up and things, or others. I don't even know, man. I don't even know. They're just constantly changing things. And we streamers just have to live with it. So yeah, it sucks. It sucks for everyone. It sucks for us as well. I do apologize. But yeah, hopefully it's helping you somewhat. Kinda. I mean, I'm making like a couple cents from the ads, or like a handful of dollars over a couple months. I guess it's like, eh. It's not nothing. I've seen bigger streamers, people with like 50 to 100 viewers, who say, yeah, no, when they get ad breaks, like a single month, they can make something like $100 just from ad revenue, or $200 just from ad revenue. And it's like, okay, that's something. But obviously, it all depends on how many viewers you have during the ads, if they block them, um, like even like what region they're in and such, like what kind of ads they get to see, how many ads they get to see, right? Some people report, oh, I just saw 10 ads, and others are like, after an ad or two, they're like, oh, we're done already, right? So it's, yeah, I don't know. And I do imagine that the number of ads that are being shown determines how much money you get, because you only get ads, money for ads that are actually being shown. So it's, I don't know. There's so little control we have over this. It's all just like Twitch says, you must have ads, and then we just say yes, okay, daddy. And that's it. I heard it's often around 0.001, 0.005 an ad, but it ranges wildly. Yeah, and I believe that's per viewer, right? And I think it measures something like at minutes watched, right? Which is also per viewer. So if you have 100 viewers watching 1 minute, you get 100 minutes, and then that changes how much money you get. Um, very much. So yeah, it does range wildly. And they had so many different things. I still remember back like 2 years ago or something, where running 3 minutes of ads every hour was considered outrageously long. But it's like some bigger streamers were given the option. It's like, yo, if you want run 3 minutes of ads an hour, we give you this much money. And a lot of streamers were like, you know what, that's a good compromise. And now it's the standard, 3 minutes per hour. It's just slowly snuck in there and became the standard. Whereas before that, it wasn't. So yeah, yeah, it's very sneaky, and the right kind of, and the kind of, yeah, definitely. Right, how many people they expect to watch certain ads. It, I can imagine the country you're in, or the country your viewers are in, whatever demographic info they can dig up, the kind of the category you're streaming in, the categories you tend to stream in, the viewers, like what kind of categories that they tend to watch, etc., etc., etc. All of this data, right? That's big data. All of that goes into that, I can imagine. So, yeah, definitely very, very wide ranging. Um, so yeah, but essentially, I'd rather take these scheduled ads than pre-rolls because pre-rolls are even worse. So I'd rather have like a fixed 3 minutes, then everyone can take a break. I can take a break very quickly. I can hop to the bathroom or get a drink or whatever. Now I'm getting a side banner ad. Oh my god. What? Okay. I better get some money from Twitch for that. Dang. Using my platform like this. Okay. But yeah, Twitch is just constantly, it's like this is the thing that makes them money, right? So they have a big incentive of optimizing this thing compared to everything else. So yeah. Adversary roster. We were talking about this. So I was saying generally how you design a dungeon, and in principle, there's nothing wrong with that to start with, is you have all of your rooms, right? You have your map with all of your rooms and such, and then you pick a bunch of rooms and you say, in this room, there's 3 goblins. In this room, there's 2 orcs. In this room, there's 5 goblins playing cards. In this room, there's a carrion crawler. In this room, there's a slime, whatever, blah, 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 and so on, right? And you just distribute a bunch of monsters into all the rooms. But then every room is its own self contained experience, its own self contained little game, really, right? It's like, oh, if I'm in the first room and I'm fighting the 2 orc guards, nothing else in the dungeon gets changed, right? And then I murder the 2 orc guards. Nice, I get their loot, whatever. And then I'm in the dungeon again, and then I continue crawling, and then nothing is going to change if I hop into an adjacent room and there's a couple of goblins in there. Oh, suddenly the goblins are surprised or whatever. Uh, and no one patrols around, no one discovers all of the trail of bodies you're leaving behind and sounds the alarm. Um, no one hears any combat happening in other rooms. Uh, Everyone is like, if you enter this room, the goblins will always be playing cards no matter what. If they've been sitting there 10 hours or 50 or 2, it doesn't matter, right? They're all just there playing cards. And that you can, no one tries to escape if they are outnumbered. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is a system problem as well because D&D combat does not allow for escapes. If you escape, you get murdered. That's just how the system works. Um, the combat system. But yeah, even so, if like people are, oh heck, a patrol is like, oh heck, there's a trail of bodies that goes through 10 rooms now, and there's been 50 goblins that have been murdered. Let's grab the rest and get out of here, right? What is happening, right? Um, and so on. Like nothing of that. And essentially, this kind of adversary roster um, bypasses all that and makes the dungeon dynamic. So, what is an adversary roster? It's really just a list. It's a list. Let me use this color or a green screen. List of adversaries or adversary groups. That's probably easier to run. Plus usual routine, right? Or usual place. So you might have there might be a guard room, right, in the beginning of the dungeon, and there's always 2 goblins in there. But it's not necessarily always the same goblins, doesn't matter, but maybe you have like, I don't know, they work in 3 shifts. Okay. They might be organized enough to have 3 shifts, so you have 3, as an example, 3 goblin guards, right? So you have 3 of these groups, and then you can detail them: 2 goblins, right? I don't know, spears, leather armor, blah 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 blah, right? You stat block them out however you need, and then you can write down here like 1 always in guard room, and then the 2 others as common goblins. So wherever they might be sleeping, or they might be playing cards, or they might be eating, or whatever, right? And so on. And then you just have a bunch of these things, and then you can say, well, there's some goblins, and they're always in this room. Fair. Then you could even put those into the room itself, and in the list, or both, right? Or whatever. Because they're, I don't know, they're in the living space essentially, right? They're always in the living space. They're cooking food, preparing food, or I don't know, mending clothes, or sleeping, hanging out, socializing, whatever, right? They're always in the living space. Okay, so you have a bunch of goblins in there, and then you have some goblins that are on patrol, right? Then you have, okay, what is the usual patrol path, right? You can mark that down in the map, and then and such things. And when you roll random encounters, you can also draw them from this adversary list, right? And so on. And essentially, what this means is the dungeon is no longer just a static theme park ride where you get into a room and then you do the thing, and then you go into the next room and then you do the thing, and so on and so forth. It's depending on what time it is, maybe the players go in at one point, right? Like it matters when the players go in, or if they go to a certain position and then they have a loud combat. Maybe there are other goblins nearby who hear this. How do they react? Well, if they're soldiers, they might jump in and try to help. If they're not, they might sound the alarm or whatever, flee, etc. And that makes the dungeon come alive. It is more work to run, yes, but this is a method you can use to help organize all of the information. And as these adversaries get killed or captured, or they run away or so, you just cross them off the list, right? And then you can see your progress through the dungeon like that. um and that can also help a lot. um Anything else? Let me put down major players and factions. um and then, yeah, random encounters, and even a dungeon crawling procedure if you want. Having a pool of enemies broken into groups. Yes, exactly. And that makes sure that you know who's in there. Uh, and there's like progress, so to speak. But also these groups might do different things, and maybe they're smart and they start flanking the characters. This is where dungeon loops come into play, right? The characters are in one room fighting a group, and then suddenly from behind them, a patrol comes in because they heard the fighting or they found some dead people, right? Um, and suddenly the characters are pincered. Uh-oh. Right? If you throw that at a group that's only used to linear static dungeons, they are likely going to panic. But it will be memorable and interesting, I can guarantee. And it's completely naturalistic as well. You don't have to arbitrarily say, yo, I want this fight to be more challenging, therefore I'm going to pincer you guys in round 3. No, it's just loud fighting noise. Let me check if any goblins heard this. Let me roll. Or maybe, oh yeah, no, this goblin patrol is following this route and the players have gone through this route, so now the patrol finds the signs of combat or finds the signs of people having gone through here and plundering the place. Yeah, they're gonna follow and see what's up. And then they hear fighting. Okay. That you set up rules for, exactly. Um what can help with a dungeon, but it's not necessary, is also some sort of okay, theme is definitely, this is not, I just thought of this theme, obviously. So this includes things like environment, inhabitants, right? You might not want just 20 different types of monsters thrown into a single dungeon. Well, you could, right? Early D&D was gonzo like that. You could just throw in whatever and then the players would just encounter all sorts of strange things. You can, but if you want to follow a certain theme, that it helps thinking about that as well. Inhabitants, right? Details and contents. And heck, even the treasure or things like puzzles, right, can even help with that. Like establishing a certain theme. Um One thing that might help is a goal. Now, very often dungeons, especially older dungeons, are also just you go in there because you want to find treasure. Duh. It was a goal unto itself. But you can combine this with more modern play styles where you have a story and then the dungeon could have a goal that need not always be murder the boss, right? You could have something else. It could be retrieve the MacGuffin. It could be solve this thing. It could be find a certain information, rescue a person, whatever. But it gives the players context under which to make decisions, right? If the goal is not clear the entire dungeon, and in fact it might be detrimental to the players or player character's health and continued survival to try and clear the entire dungeon, then you might have a clear goal that says, yeah, no, there is this piece of information, this part of a ritual or whatever, part of a magic ritual that you're trying to find here. It's somewhere. Find the underground route long forgotten. Exactly, right? Anything. And then the players might say, right, if we continue down this way, there's a lot of combat there. We don't want to go this way, but down here, this part of the dungeon looks older, right? Maybe the information is here concerning the, like, given that the ritual is very old, and such, so maybe it might be here. And then they go there, and then indeed they find it written on, I don't know, a mural or something. It's like, oh, this is the instructions for the ritual, da da da. They copy it down, and then they can be like, yeah, let's leave. We're done for now. Right? Um, so it need not always be. Let me write this. Need not always be clear the dungeon. Now, clearing certain sections might be safer because then the PCs can more guarantee that nothing will fall into their back, right? It's like you don't want to leave people alive that could fall, that could um ambush you from behind and such. Hey, Amon, good morning. Welcome, welcome. How's it going? I hope you had a good weekend. You are coming into the ending bit. We're just finishing up a list here, and then I will have to call it no loose ends. Kind of, but it's more like if you're going down a dungeon and you choose one path, you know that whoever is down the right path might decide to go after you, and then suddenly you're stuck between that group of enemies and whatever's further down the dungeon, right? So this is the whole possibility of being ambushed really comes alive during in dungeons with loops and dynamic dungeons, because like if your dungeon is very linear and all the enemies just nicely sit in their rooms without moving until you go in, then you don't have to fear being ambushed at all, right? That's not a thing. But if you introduce a lot of loops into your dungeon and you introduce the possibilities of enemies moving around or perhaps random encounters and so on, then the players will start to make actual choices of saying, do we risk this fight to make sure our backs are clear? Or do we just push on ahead and hope to be in and out very quickly, right? Do we block off doors behind us to make sure no one can come in? This is like a lot of this older stuff. Like, why are there is that still in the player's handbook? In the 5e player's handbook, do they still have this? Let me check real quick. Equipment. Equipment. Where do they have that? Items. Tools. Oh no, that's not it. Do they have like adventuring gear? Tack harness drawn trade goods? Wait, did they get rid of the adventuring gear table? Holy heck, did they? Containers? Oh no, adventuring gear. Spikes. In the player's handbook, in the 5e player's handbook, at least the older one, there is this an adventuring gear table on page 150, and on that you have iron spikes as an entry. Caltrops or ball bearings, not that. Set a trap makes the door locking spell so much worth taking. Alarm also, yes, exactly. Iron spikes. Why the heck do you still have iron spikes? The reason being, in old dungeons, the entire dungeon environment was hostile to you. Every door had a chance to be stuck or locked. So when you encounter a door, the GM rolls, and then on a 1 out of 6, it's stuck, or on a 2 out of 6, it's locked, or something like that, right? Depends on exactly the dungeon and system, blah, blah, blah. And there was always this basic rule, and this is not a dungeon-specific rule, this was in the base dungeon crawling procedures of the game. The players, right, if they leave a room, all open doors of that room slam shut. So when they go back to that door, once again, it could be stuck or locked again. And the only way to make sure that doors stay open is to spike them open. That's why players carry iron spikes with them. The other reason is monsters have no trouble going through doors, right? The actual dungeon inhabitants, all the doors are perfectly fine for them. Unlocked, unstuck, everything. If the players wanted to rest in a room, right? They would find a dead-end room with only a single door, if possible, and then spike the door shut to make sure that monsters cannot get in. Again, this is why you carry iron spikes with you, right? And so the whole idea of, yeah, no, monsters are wandering. If we turn a corner, there could be a monster there without warning, without planning. And monsters will go through rooms, they will patrol, right? And if we just sleep in a random room, it's likely that a monster is just going to wander in there and now we have to fight. And we don't want that. And things like that. So you spike the door shut to have somewhat of an undisturbed rest that might like lower the chance of a random encounter and such, depending on the exact dungeon circumstances. Um, right? So you don't have that in modern dungeons because you don't have this dungeon crawling procedure happening, and the dungeon is static, right? Even if the players just sleep 8 hours in the dungeon and then continue adventuring, the goblins that were playing cards in the next room are still playing cards in the next room. Because, that's what they're designed to do. That's how you wrote the encounter. That's how it's going to run. Um, so that's. And, like, I get it. It's easy to run. And it can be a lot of fun to just, like, treat a dungeon like this as a theme park ride in this sense, right? But there are other ways. There are ways to make the dungeon more dynamic, to make it more complex, to make to give the players more context in making choices. And you can see how that changes how players uh face the dungeon, how they deal with the dungeon. And this is a lot of what older D&D did. Right? This is how they played, and that's why it is a completely different play style, really. Um, yeah. So yeah, a lot of basic tips we had. Yeah, using maps. We started out with using maps. True, as always, it's a lot to think about. It is. Um, because a lot of this info is not given to people, especially not in books that claim to guide people into this. Um, so yeah, there's that. And we talked about these dungeons, how they're actually very linear, so modern dungeons, right? And they do this in both of these maps. Have this secret door that cuts the dungeon in half, right? And then some extra tips on building dungeons. It all like you don't have to implement everything at once. Obviously, it is a lot, and it is very different from how a lot of modern dungeons are designed in published adventures as well. Like both of these are from published things, right? Um, from published content. Like big official D&D published content. It would make sense that the inhabitants of the place have ways to move easier. Yeah, that as well, right? They understand how things work. Maybe there's like a trick to opening the door that only they know, right? And so on and so forth. Or they carry around keys or whatever, like knowing how to avoid a trap. Yes, that as well. Especially if they built the trap. Like kobolds are notorious for building traps, and they should be really difficult opponents. There's this infamous article called Tucker's Kobolds that turns kobolds, a bunch of kobolds, into absolutely deadly opponents by using the environment to their advantage. Um, and a lot of high level parties encounter Tucker's kobolds and just like, I'm done, please, no more. I knew that one. Yeah, it is infamous. In a good way. Um, and But you don't have to do all of it. You can just start by making a dungeon a bit more looping, for example, right? When next time you draw a dungeon, try to include some more loops and interesting ways through. And then you can still fill all the rooms with encounters as usual if you want, right? Um, and then when you get that down, then you can move on to something like an adversary roster. Try that out. And then you can say, all right, let's have an actual quest in this dungeon, right? and so on. And then there's things like restocking the dungeon if players are expected to return to the dungeon multiple times, etc. Especially for a mega dungeon. There's a lot more. The rabbit hole goes very, very deep. Or you watch your placement of traps and secret doors. You say, I want to make some interesting traps that don't train the players to search every single little tile. And then you just focus on practicing that. And that's it. So yeah, just no need to put everything in there all at once. A hallway with kobolds or the other one with human eating demons. Take my luck with the demons. Yes. Yeah, the story from the player perspective. Exactly. Okay. It's nearing 2:30. I need to slowly get ready for my job, my actual job for teaching. So, let me go over here. So yeah, I actually talked a lot about prepping dungeons, which is a big thing as well. Okay. These are actually a lot of fun. I might continue this for a while. I think a slow implementation of things helps also players. Fair point. Definitely helps people get used to, especially if they're already used to playing dungeons that are a certain way. Very linear dungeons, or dungeons or traps are just, oh, I roll, done, right, and so on. And then you introduce these things slowly and then break their habits. That can help. Yes. Let's see who there is. Ah. Okay, there is someone celebrating 4 years, 4-year anniversary. Dang. Okay, let's go there. This is Fauna, who is a bit more chaotic of a streamer, but very cool. And she is celebrating her fourth anniversary, which is quite an accomplishment. So go say hi, go congratulate her. She's currently playing Keep Talking Nobody Explodes, which is a fun time, which is great to see. All right. So, thank you all for being here. This was a lot of fun. I think I will continue with this kind of content for now. And yeah, I hope to see you all again soon. I appreciate you all being here. Take care, stay hydrated, and bye-bye.